Hello, everyone. The last day of readings for the year. I also love Bollywood so much. It is the last reading for 2025. Can you believe that we are almost at the end of a very long year? Um, yeah, it's been really fucking long. um, I do believe that it was a long year on the 21st of January with all of those executive orders being signed. It's been long since then. Like, I can't believe it. It is a reading, and you can also go to these other places to hear the reading. We are reading a book called Rape, a South African Nightmare by a dear comrade of mine, Pumla Dineo Gqola. And yeah, we are on chapter 7. How is everybody doing? Has everybody had their water, meds, eaten something? And has everybody said something kind about themselves today? Because, yeah, we all need to. Because, yes, this year has been an absolute shit show. We still have 3 more years of this man's presidency to endure. What you can do is follow a person named Midlight Purple, and they do tarot readings there. So, no, I do not do palm reading and tarot. I do book readings. I don't think Cole is still in here, B, but I will definitely tell him. Yeah, that's if he makes it that long. TikTok. Tell me you're learning, because I'm sure we all have some of those. Yeah, let me know what... Yeah, no. He was here. Oh, you can send the live to him again. So, we are on chapter 7. And the last chapter that we went over spoke about child essay and how that is perceived, how it is prosecuted, how it is received by society, and how even in those cases there is victim blaming, which is absolutely wild to me. I went to the doctor today, and my doctor, my general practitioner, she is absolutely amazing. The first thing she asked is, how's your heart? Not as in how is the physical health of my heart, but how is my heart? And I told her it's feeling very weak in the face of everything that we have had to endure over the past, I don't know how long. And yes, it is broken. I have been very heartbroken this year. But it's still going. And that is the most important part. That even though it's a little bit worse for wear, it's still beating. And this year has been a tough one. A very tough year. And reading this book in particular has been eye-opening for me in terms of how I approach talking about rape, sexual assault, sexual harassment, and having been through the worst kind of it, and come out the other side still doing what I do. We also spoke about forgiveness, and I'll get to that in a little bit, because forgiveness isn't always necessary. Thank you, Alex. So we are on page 143, chapter 7, Rape Myths. In our obsessive talk about rape and other forms of gendered violence, several myths about rape get high circulation. We hear them in private conversations as well as in public ones. Sometimes they pass unchallenged, while at other times they are passionately defended. Is approached. Addressing them allows us to move closer to a world in which rape is taken seriously, where survivors can be supported and recover, and where rape is dissuaded rather than excused. It's also important to note that rape myths do dangerous work. They can embolden perpetrators and re-traumatize victims and survivors. Myths and excuses are at the heart of what is keeping rape culture intact. If we accept that it is time to render all forms of gendered violence genuinely illegitimate in all spaces we occupy, to constantly debunk myths whenever we encounter them, because all gender-based violence is brutality, a form of gender war against survivors' bodies and psyches. The myths and excuses are listed in no particular order here. I simply address them in the order in which they came to me in the shortest chapter. Perpetrators are monsters who are abusive all the time. That is myth number 1. This is an expectation that many people have, and consequently, one of the most enduring rape myths. It rears its head often when a survivor's narrative is being questioned. Rapists and other abusers are normal people. They can be loving and gentle to those close to them. Remember the serial rapists who are upset by the prospect of their loved ones being treated the way they treat other women? That's not so unusual. There is no consensus on what characteristics are to be found in someone who is likely to rape or be abusive in any other way. The only thing that rapists have in common is the refusal to accept the word no. Ooh, B? Thank you, B. I appreciate that. Thank you, Cole. How are you, my love? B has asked me to tell you his joke. Where do Indian people leave their moms? In Mumbai. Let's unpack this. That perpetrators are monsters who abuse all the time. No. Perpetrators are not always monsters. Perpetrators are not always bad people in their day-to-day lives. Some abusers look like upstanding members of society. They have this outward persona of being respected, respectable, educated, highly educated sometimes, and high-powered jobs, high-standing members in society. Somebody who people would look at and say, that's a good person. And then all of a sudden you hear, they're a rapist. And everybody thinks, no, that can't be. That person's not a monster. No, they're not a monster. They're human. And they did a human thing to another human. It is not monsters who rape. It is everyday people. Number 2, rape is inappropriate sex. Rape is not sex. It is an act of non-consensual sexual violence directed against a woman or someone constructed as feminine, an expression of masculine power and female vulnerability. Vulnerability indeed seems to be the theme which occurs in all the studies I have read of raped women. This is from Yvette Abrams. Rape is not about sex. It is about power. It is a highly painful experience, a traumatic experience, and like other serious traumas, has negative effects on those who survive it. Rape is usually feminists have sought to shift the ways in which people and the legal system treat rape is through the recognition of rape as rape. Some survivors feel excessively cold, experience gynecological problems, sore throats, tension headaches, abdominal and back pain, insomnia, excessive drowsiness, loss and increase in appetite, dramatic changes in menstrual cycles, increased pains, nausea, discharge, sexually transmitted. Survivors may change their behavior by isolating themselves or going out more than before, difficulty concentrating, agitation, anxiety, depression, loss of interest in things that were important to them before, oversensitivity to things that did not bother them before, and may become easily startled or frightened. Survivors can also experience sexual disruption, significant shifts in sexual behavior. I have known women who lost all interest in sex after a rape, as well as women who reported that they wanted to have sex with their partners as trying to return to normal, to establish that their partners still found them attractive. At the same time, I have witnessed previously solid relationships disintegrate completely in the aftermath. Some survivors experience flashbacks, develop phobias, or turn to substances that allow them to escape. Others develop trauma phobias, both temporary and longer term, triggered by rape trauma, which may not have existed prior to being raped. Although different combinations of these are experienced, feelings of shame, guilt, and self-blame are the most common. Those who seem to continue as though unaffected are in denial, a state of shock, trying to block it out. Surviving means learning to confront at your own pace, to living with rape having happened. Counseling helps the survivor move through various stages of trauma to healing. It's not about sex, it's about exerting power through sexual exploitation. Myth number 3. There is a proper way to respond to being raped. This myth brings to mind a cartoon by Voices Rising that used to appear in many feminist publications until about a decade ago. A myth that places a policeman and a man dressed in legal garb with a wig, blouse and black robe, standing alongside each other, facing forward with speech bubbles above their heads. The police officer's speech bubble says, "If you want to survive rape, don't fight back." The lawyer's bubble says, "If you don't fight back, you must have wanted it." There is no one single way to respond to rape, nor is the criminal justice system consistent in what it expects from survivors and those who seek to support them. Instead, globally, when it comes to rape, survivors often confront mixed messages all the time that are shaped by these myths that suggest that women's sexual proclivities are responsible for their violation, and that women are perpetually sex objects and men are both disarmed and helpless against their natural desire for women's bodies, that they have fear, a fear of injury, fear of death. Next one. Rape is when a man rapes a woman using his penis to forcibly penetrate her vagina. Rape is of non-biological weapons is not unheard of. Rape Crisis Cape Town notes, "It's important to realize that rape can happen between same-sex partners, and thinking that rape can only happen between a man and a woman is also a myth. In certain instances, women have been known to rape men, but at Rape Crisis, we find this to be the exception rather than the rule, so we base our comments on rape between man and woman, realizing that each rape is unique, even as we generalize." Next one. Rape myths are just harmless ignorance. No, they're not harmless. They're so fucking harmful. They actually have real effects, sometimes implications for who is held accountable and responsible. They create the image of an ideal or real rape and the notion of mostly false rape as abundant. This is inaccurate since rape differs and false reports are generally the exception, less than 0.1% worldwide. 3% in the US and Canada. Hi Taro, welcome in. Rape myths enable rape culture to thrive and sometimes enable the secondary victimization of survivors and create what is called the female fear factory. Some myths shame the survivor instead of offering support towards healing. Next, real rape victims/survivors lay charges with the police because they have nothing to lose. Often when a woman breaks her silence, or when several women accuse the same man of sexual assault, various people who are not directly involved insist that those real rape victims, seek out police help since they have nothing to hide. This is possibly one of the most dangerous myths. Research findings on rape reporting show that only a small percentage of those who are sexually violated report it, for a range of reasons, from stigma to fear of secondary victimization to knowledge of how low the chances are of a successful prosecution. A 2005 Medical Research Council report showed that 1 in 9 women reported rape to the police, whereas South African Police Service in 2010-2011 reported that 66,000 cases of sexual assault were reported by children against children. 5 rapes are reported to the police in Gauteng. The authors predicted that there were fluctuations in this number in other provinces, with even lower rates of reporting in some provinces based on previous findings. Many forms of rape and sexual assault are normalized, or to quote from the 1 in 9 campaign publication in 2012, "We were never meant to survive violence in the lives of HIV plus women." Some forms of sexual violence too have sex, with the latter comprising the vast majority of sexual violence, those not involving quote-unquote overt violence, where the perpetrators are members of the family or boyfriends and husbands. There are various reasons why rape reporting is lower than the incidence. Rape crisis counts among those reasons various consequences that may result from being identified as a survivor, including but not limited to loss of financial support if the rapist is a family member, stigma, protecting loved ones from consequences, as in the case of E.G. and Carol, of the rapist being arrested, lack of access to required services, where the police stations are far away or some kind of impediment, fear of further violence by the rapist and those associated with him not being believed, and the knowledge that the legal justice system has few successful cases of prosecution, with rape crisis reporting 4% conviction rates in Gauteng and 7% in the Western Cape. In 2010-2011, Rape Crisis saw over 2,700 rape cases for direct support, and the number increased to over 5,000 in 2012. Some of these survivors had reported the matter, and some had not. Those who reported experienced the judicial system in many instances helpful, with distinct pockets of excellence, where dedicated officials went the extra mile on their behalf and made them believe that their case was being taken very seriously. But even when this was the case in one area of the criminal justice system, the opposite was true in another. With the result, there was no one case where all parts of the system, police, health, and court, worked well in a coordinated fashion to ensure a successful conviction. In 2016, my case was taken very seriously. In the prior hearing, in one of the first hearings, I was completely 100% believed and supported until I said I was sexually abused for years as a child. The lawyers chose instead of me taking the stand. So they chose to read my affidavit instead. In a case that was brought forward by 6 femmes. Who were raped by the same man. I was seen as an unreliable witness because of my history. Because somebody else chose that for me. Next. Rape is about male arousal and the need to have sex. Rape is sometimes enacted with objects rather than the penis, yet violence against women is seen as an individual male aberration rather than a societal problem. The social reality for women is that they face the potential threat of violence and rape in their lives. The life of men is comparatively secure. They can walk in parks, commune at night without fear, as Navi Pillay reminds us. Then, dressing a certain way or being visibly drunk invites rape. Women are raped in all manners of dresses and undress, often by people they know, having no correlation between how a woman dresses and her ability to escape it. Rape is about power, not seduction, and men are not helpless children but adults with the power of self-control. Women should be free to dress as they please without being blamed for what might be done to them. Next. Rapists are strangers who abduct a woman in public and rape them in unknown places. This one is not quite a myth. While globally most survivors know they're rapists, there are also cultures of women being abducted from public spaces and being raped, either by single men or gang raped. There are also established histories of women attacked under conditions of war. Various chapters in this book revisit this notion that women are not likely to be raped by a stranger, to show that in South Africa, many rapes have fallen into just this category. Cannot be raped. Anyone can be. Just because people work in an industry where sex is for sale does not mean they are available for sex with all people all the time. Sex workers are capable of saying no, of not wanting to have sex, and therefore they can be raped. This is especially so since rape is not about sex but power and vulnerability, and sex workers can be particularly vulnerable since the work in a criminalized sector cannot claim the same resources than other workers can. There's also a wealth of research that shows that a significant percentage of sex workers become prostitutes through trafficking and rape. In other words, not only can they be raped, but sometimes their entry into this work is through sexual violence, which may continue. Oh, this play hard to get. Fuck right off with that noise. Playing hard to get is a patriarchal construct that enables rape culture. For as long as it's taken for granted that women are playing hard to get when they turn down men's heterosexual advances, they can be pursued in courtship processes of heterosexual chases that ultimately changes the refusal to acquiescence. The phenomenon of being friend-zoned is allied to this, suggesting that there is something humorously amiss when a woman chooses to be friends with a man who desires a romantic or sexual relationship. Men are constantly trying to escape in order to successfully attain romantic or sexual partner status. Yet, if the women are adults, cannot be an accident. Then, rape looks a certain way. It leaves a specific imprint on the body. Jane Bennett continues to ask, what kind of physical referential pain is inflicted by rape? The body is a visibly whole thing after rape as before. There are likely to be abrasions, bruises, perhaps worse if a weapon was used, but markings are mere witnesses to the presence, only a hint at the wound itself in a script that lends itself so easily to the description of an unfortunate accident as to the sometimes temporary annihilation of the semiotic process through which a woman may make sense of war against women's psyches and bodies. It's time to stop giving airplay to the excuses that make rape and other forms of gender-based violence seem harmless, excuses that allow it to stay normal. Excuses keep gender-based violence against women, girls, boys, gender non-conforming people, queers of all hues in place, holding survivors hostage while letting perpetrators off. In other words, when we make excuses, we provide cover for brutal people to violate all others with impunity, specifically brutal men. Slut-shaming, rape culture, intimate femicide, sexual harassment, trafficking, forced marriage of girls to men old enough to be their grandfathers, all rely on excuses to make them seem acceptable and to make rape seem harmless. Excuses says it's fine to punish a survivor for the short skirt she wears, fine to excuse the male professor who sexually harasses his students and colleagues, over sexualizing people, making inappropriate comments to that woman, is obliged to think of compliments to stay alive. It's not fine. Excuses say violence against black women is part of generalized violence against black people, and that brutal men cannot be called a monster when they rape, beat their partners, and make excuses, because it's all a really dangerous excuse. All men, no matter working class black men rape, and white women and gender non-conforming people do not have to deal with this from the white, middle, and upper class educated men. Chapter 2 and 6 have many examples of white men who rape as individuals as part of armies as well, and I've also given many examples of men who are not poor and who have been accused or convicted. Excuses make violence against women possible. They are part of the complicated network that says women are not human, so our pain is generalized, unimportant, discarded even. So we give violent men permission to keep all of those they deem vulnerable, such as women, men, and gender non-conforming people or children, into violence. When we make excuses, we become the perpetrators and their allies. It is important to redefine what justice means, recognizing that it lies not in political speeches. The mention of non-sexism at the bottom of stationery. For many women, it's not the criminal justice system. Survivors of gender-based violence are in the world's majority, walking the streets all day, everywhere, sitting next to you and a teacher. Hi. And I don't know if you noticed, I didn't use a single tab in that chapter. Not because nothing is standing out to me or anything, but because we know this. And yet, those myths persist. Even in our own minds, as people who are deconstructing. Any questions? we're reading this book. We just finished the chapter. This is underneath an hour. So I'm going to take a wee break and come back for chapter 8. And we may actually finish the book today. Twitch and YouTube, I'm going to be back in a little bit. And we're back. Do you think they ruined it? Communities and war talk. And this is something that I've written about recently. I wrote about it on my Substack, about war and masculinity. And so let's get into it. Page 152 if you're following. Thanks, Taro. There's a connection between rape culture, the manufacture of female fear, and violent masculinities. It is as follows. Violent masculinities create a public consciousness in which violence is not just acceptable and justified, but natural and desirable. They glamorize violence in a variety of masking maneuvers that seduce spectators into mythologizing it. In other words, while watching violence, we imagine we are watching something humorous. Humorous. Acts of freedom, play, and healthy assertions of the self. In a country such as South Africa, where violence is so embedded in so many processes of communication, and not just contestation, it is possible to misread violence as something else, to cease seeing manifestations of it. We attain. This is particularly true as our violence-saturated public and private worlds rub up against global machinery that is gun-toting, celebrating hypermasculinity in film, war, and music. This glamorization also makes violence appear as if it's the same thing as radical transformative politics, thereby reinforcing a culture or atmosphere that is about making threats to others, sometimes other men, but also women. Sometimes these threats of violence are direct and at other times translated into regimes that police women and vulnerable others, telling women what body styling choices are legitimate and what are not, shaming people for body styling choices, sexual orientation, and gender nonconformity. This pervasive culture of violence also means that when others defend themselves or stand up for themselves by questioning violent men, the latter groups become available for attack by the defenders of violent men. For example, when Oscar Pistorius was on trial for killing his girlfriend Riva Steenkamp, legions of Paralympians, mostly women fans calling themselves Pistorians, proceeded to tweet, Facebook, and elsewhere hashtags a variety of flattering comments on Pistorius across social media, defending him against any criticism by trolling social media and attacking those who were critical of or angered by Pistorius' killing of his girlfriend. They were focusing on stifling dissent and anger that Pistorius had killed a woman and how the court case was proceeding, the intersections of gender, class, and race in aspects of the defense, and the manner in which this killing intersected with the high statistic for alarm. This defense of a man that even the Pistorians have to admit is a violent man with guns in public and private spaces, as well as those bullets shot into his bathroom, is an example of how space is made for violent masculinities to take center stage, and war talk is legitimized. This was the same kind of manifestation that we saw outside the court during the Jacob Zuma rape trial, but also one that went far beyond that to threaten some of Zuma's detractors to utter statements that have ranged from insisting they would defend Zuma with all their might, as though he is in physical danger, to insisting that they would kill for him. This creation of a public culture saturated with threats of violence serves to silence dissent and strengthen the female fear factory. The fact of the matter is Zuma was the president of a democratic country and therefore legitimately subjected to scrutiny, as are many other elected officials such as the former leader of the opposition, Helen Zille, and the leader of the new small opposition party, Julius Malema. Yet, while in principle our public figures agree that they may be questioned, in practice, some of them respond with threatening or violently dismissive language when questioned. Even more troublingly, many of those who came to their defense also do with such viciousness that across the spectrum, violence has become the norm. Before I attend to some examples of what I mean by violent masculinities and war talk, let me pay attention to what it is not. Hypermasculinity goes hand in hand with violent masculinities, misogyny, and wars. However, not all claims to masculinity are in and of themselves assertions of violence, or at least the specific kind of violence I'm concerned with. It is possible for individuals and groups of men to lay claim to adult masculine identity without being hypermasculine. Hypermasculinity is a heightened claim to patriarchal manhood, to aggression, strength, and sexual prowess. It is effectively manhood on metaphoric steroids. Therefore, even as I elect here to identify and problematize those who most consistently demonstrate war talk in South Africa and South African public life, it's important to note that historically, there are wide-ranging masculinities in South Africa and historic claims to manhood that form part of the political left. Raymond Stutner's scholarship reminds us of the further complicated ways in which assertions of African masculinity can be expressions of both freedom and patriarchal power. Under colonialism and apartheid, adult Africans were designated boys and girls, legally and economically, infantilized. It is therefore important to be attentive to the layered meanings of asserted manhood. Stutner reflects on this phenomenon thus. The infantilization of Africans, and men in particular, links to or seeks to justify political domination by designating Africans as a race of children. In reading African assertions of manhood, we need to understand it as a challenge not only to a childlike status, but symbolizing wider rejection of overlordship. The assertion of manhood in this context is a claim for freedom. He also notes, notions of masculinity are essentially conditional, contested, ambiguous, or contradictory, and have varied over time at any particular moment within any particular experience. In other words, there is a long history of claiming manhood as a state of being an adult, which is different from, although sometimes linked to, the patriarchal denunciation of emasculation. Of emasculation. In this history that Stutner writes of, claims to manhood were a rejection of the specific infantilization of African men. Thus, toward much scholarship reads assertions of manhood as straightforward, patriarchal statements. Stutner insists that context demands attention to the complicated work at play here, even when such assertions are patriarchal. In other words, it's not a mere claiming or evoking of manhood that matters, but also the specific ways in which contexts inflect meanings of such assertions on specific masculinities. Understanding this is key to appreciating the varied and specific ways in which apartheid was also a gendered project. And that's important. Apartheid was, and in corporate and private spaces now, still is, violent masculinity at play. And that is why I always say, patriarchy, white supremacy, and capital work hand in hand with each other. Consequently, anti-apartheid initiatives were also gendered in precise ways, and not all patriarchal. But even the patriarchal ones were not always engaged in war talk in celebration of violent masculinities. It is exactly the complicated combination of struggle parlance and violent masculinity that leads to the unrigged responses to such hypermasculine performance are also influenced by the collective memory that is indexed by the masculinities under discussion. Stutner's warning about how to make sense of the performed and or claimed ANC masculinities is important here, noting that if full weight is not given to the denial of manhood, one cannot give meaning to the claim of it. One cannot read of gender relations or a negative relationship to women and the assertion of manhood itself. The assertion of manhood has no self-evident or timeless meaning. The struggle to be a man meant the struggle for dignity and reclaiming the rights and to be treated as an adult human being. This is something that needs to be read into any analysis of ANC or African National Congress masculinities. In other words, different meanings agency, which is defiant in the face of an infantilizing regime. It is thus difficult to read the mere statement of manhood as automatically indexing patriarchal relationships with women. As Stutner warns, superficial attention to history and therefore context leads to easy answers that don't hold up to scrutiny. And you know what? "13 vials of my inside juice was taken today, and I'm starting to feel dizzy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it here and pick it up next year. I'm going to pick it up in, and I cannot believe that it is actually the 11th of December. My birthday is in exactly 2 months from today. And yeah, I've got my 12-year wedding anniversary on Monday. It is South Africa's Day of Reconciliation. On Tuesday, and well, the holiday period for us starts on the 19th. Generally, people are off from the 16th onwards, but my husband is on leave from the 19th. And yeah, I will be back on the 5th of January. And if I'm feeling too exhausted, then maybe the 12th. But yeah, I look forward to seeing you next year. Thank you for being with me throughout these readings. Thank you for being so patient with me as I faltered a lot this year, as I picked myself up from an incredibly difficult year. And thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for bearing witness to my growth as an activist, and for supporting me through all of it. And I shall see you in the new year. I appreciate y'all. Drink water, take your meds, eat something. Remember to smash the motherfucking patriarchy, eat all the white men, and if you don't eat meat, compost them. And remember to be kind, especially to yourself, because everybody, including you, deserves kindness. And I wish you a happy holiday season, a wonderful new year, and I shall see you in 2026. A luta continua. We keep on fighting. We keep on working. But now take some rest, because resting is revolutionary.